What's up, you guys? Today I'm gonna be presenting a logo design for a real-time client I worked on in the previous. And for those of you guys who've always wanted to see me present a logo design in real time, this is the perfect timing for you to stick around and watch this video all the way to the end. And to give you some context, previously I presented the initial, draft of the direction of this logo design, and that was to the top level stakeholders. And trust me, everyone was excited and they loved the direction, like direction one, and to a point that they didn't want to go even to see option two. That was really something amazing. Like the feedback I got into this logo design was way up there. So this is a follow-up meeting, what you'd call maybe another presentation to get everyone on the team to buy in. I'm talking about like everyone on the team, like from this company now is gonna be in this presentation. And I usually do this to just get buy-in from everyone, because realize like top level stakeholders, at most they don't involve in daily activities at the company, but then these employees are the guys who go ahead to champion the brand. And yeah, I have a full recording of me presenting at their office, but this is gonna be me presenting over Zoom. I mean, it's gonna be real time, like me presenting, so expect the unexpected. I tend to, freeze, I tend to, mumble a lot, but it's part of the process. Like you always get to a point where you conquer your nerves, and then it feels like seamless throughout the presentation. So yeah, let's just dive in. All right, so I just want to welcome everyone to this presentation, and I'm looking forward to helping you really understand how this vision should be actualized. So just to give you like a quick idea of what Teach for Uganda is. So Teach for Uganda, the way I understand it, it's a non-government organization that is really focused on building the next leadership-oriented educators. And yeah, the goal today is to try further that narrative. So I always like want to begin my presentations with this quote that reminds us that almost like every day the tools we shape, thereafter these tools will be really handy in shaping our future. It's a quote from Marshall, one of the most prominent communicators in history. So moving on, there's a question of like, what are we doing here? As everyone comes together on these virtual meetings, there's that need to know. So we're here to build a brand that is apparent. In building this brand, there are so many things that come together, but most importantly, everyone, as a team, plays a major role in furthering the vision. So before we proceed, I just want to go ahead and try set the table. And for those of you guys who are familiar with the brand, I'm certain most of you guys do know. These are a set of ideas in the mind of our customers or our users. So there's always like this misconception of like brand and branding. So just to help everyone understand what is the difference. So now branding is that process of trying to shape that idea in the mind of the customer. So that out of the way, this engagement is part of branding. Me sitting here trying to shape this idea of the new thing or the new direction is part of the entire branding process. So we would assume these are the early days of branding. So now, one thing that I want you to look at is branding for the mind. Every time we're communicating these ideas, there is a need to understand how the mind operates, because we are not talking to people. We are talking to people who, make subconscious decisions or conscious decisions, and that is key in our everyday marketing and communication. So moving on if we're branding for the mind, there's key importance of understanding how we build these strategies and identities that later on go on to attract the mind of the customer. So the keywords there are strategy and identity. And to try to put this in perspective in a real market scenario or marketplace scenario, there is a phenomenon that is mostly known in the world of ad work, the iceberg phenomenon. And usually when people succeed at whatever they're doing, people always don't get to see the hard work. And that's why you find different arguments of maybe he was lucky, maybe he got a handout or something like that. So when you compare this to how we build a brand, there are some things that we get to see in the real world. And there are some people that stay within the company, and the people outside will never know how much sweat you guys put into building these things. And when you look at the identity, the common scenario here is the product. Products and services we position to the market, the values we attach to these products, and attributes and benefits of these entire solutions we put together. And then there's what we call the verbal identity, and this, as the word says it, it's more of like narratives we build in terms of like using different medium. It could be, the literature we come up with. The audios we put together and send out in the world. And then the visual identity is where these logos or these colors and these visual cues come into play. So one thing I want to point out when it comes to like the internal strategy, the people are part of the strategy, because when you look at the human resource, getting that new hire on board, there is a process that like the human resource team puts in hand to make sure that everyone they bring on board has some sorts of values that align with the entire rest of the team. So every individual in the team is part of the strategy. Like you being present now is not a mistake. You play a great role in building this brand. And I want to point out that most of companies now are positioning people as faces of brands. So you'll see some people come above and they become identities of these companies. I'll pull out maybe one example from maybe Tesla. We see Elon Musk coming out and almost being overshadowing the company, making him almost the brand. So whatever he says, no one answers. It's him talking for the brand. Same thing maybe Tim Cook. And maybe I'll use the word, the way our president is coming out now times, it makes him Ugandan. Like it makes him like responsible for the entire country. However much like it doesn't matter which information he carries out, but whenever there is an issue going on in the country, we need that face to relate to someone to comfort us. So it's important also like to consider based on your self-preference whether you push people outside, but I always recommend like having some presence in terms of like the human element, because brands are just like superstitions that we put together that might not communicate well compared to having a human being from a company representing the brand outside. So, and to top that with it is the strategy, the main ideation that come together, the segmentation, knowing who is your audience. All this is like internal hard work, and then later on the marketplace get to see these visuals we put outside in the world. So to carry on, I'll just try to break down, how these identities and different strategies come together to shape a unique goal. So for the goal, we thought about this process, and always like there's a need to understand that the goal is not to change, the brand or try to scrap everything that has been done before. But the goal is always like to refresh that idea in the mind of the customer. And when you repeat that, it kind of makes sense that always there is hard work that goes into like the initial early days of building a brand. So it won't really be resourceful to scrap everything that has been done before, to try just go from scratch. So in my as a branding practitioner, in my experience working on brands, this is something that I want to remind people that whatever we're building here is not taking away the old hard work. Things like depend on this current platform. Like we use this as a projector to see the vision in the future. So moving on, I want to introduce you to the first concept, which excites me, synergy. And for those of you guys who are in the initial, meeting or engagement to introduce this brand, some of you are familiar with what synergy is. But like in the word synergy, there are so many, cues or verbal cues that come across when someone talks of synergy. And one could be like these symbiotic, workflows we put in place to help like our work easier. And also like just working together collaboratively on a common goal. So what I did analyze the Teach for Uganda levels of stakeholders. And what I have here is a list of these people in different domains that come together for a common purpose. And then one thing I want you to think about, this is an umbrella of mission and vision stakeholders. And that means that these are people who work every day with a mission to achieve something, which is the vision, right? So when you furthermore break this down, you realize like there is where these people kind of like separate somewhere in between, but at the same time they work in a unified symbiotic way to put together vision. And now when you look at on the left, right, I figured that when we call these synergy blocks, it entitles them to really know that they play a major role in shaping the future, which is these growth blocks. So these growth blocks are more of the product and service we're building and packaging. When you think about it, it ain't tangible. Someone will argue like, how does this make it a product when we don't know whether it might be achieved in the near future? And that's the beauty of building, right? You don't know whether this vision is going to be achieved, and somewhere in the middle, this vision also becomes the next vision, right? So when you build and achieve a certain level, you start to become ambitious and think of more ideas on how to build more growth blocks. So to try break this furthermore, I want you to look on the left and see that these are mission stakeholders. These are people who work on the daily with the mission, as I mentioned, to try shape a vision or try to create a product, which is the growth blocks. And then when you think about growth blocks, as I mentioned, these are also mission stakeholders. They are the vision, but also they work a little bit more to further the narrative. For instance, when you look at the aspects of alumni, when you become an alumni, your role doesn't end there. You play a great role in the engine now to create more fellows, to create more students. So this makes them like vision stakeholders, but also like they are mission stakeholders in the essence of like building this vision. So to try pull this together in a vision narrative, I want you to think of the synergy blocks as a wall, right? So every wall in its essence, like every brick or every block, come together to put this wall straight. And when you remove one brick, the wall might not fall, but in certain aspects, this wall, becomes weaker. And right away, that starts the weakness. So this same idea comes together to show you how these teams work together. One team, say from the mission stakeholder side, maybe say the partners don't show up or the funders don't show up. That kind of starts the weakness, and then it kind of limits the entire role of other people or other blocks in the entire unified synergy blocks. So now, moving this idea to something that relates to the brand, I want to take you back a step and I show you where the brand is positioned right now. So the first early engagements with the stakeholders, the brief was the direction here was more of trying to build the next young generation of leaders that are not only leaders but they are educators. And when you look at this icon, I feel like it's a beautiful icon. When you listen to the story, the orange kind of encapsulates that new dawn, the sun, and that early morning, and that maybe late evening. So ideally there is a story attached to this. And as I mentioned, like our goal here is not to try ruin the story, but we want to figure out ways of how can we correct all the mistakes in this icon. And when you look at this icon, one thing that came apparent was it looks like a normal icon or a sign you would see on the road. Maybe it could represent kids crossing the road. So you don't want that confusion when you have a brand. So what I did here, I moved the blocks and try to come up with an idea of furthering this narrative of the icon, kids holding hands and building the next future. And that's how, ladies and gentlemen, we have this new icon. And when you look at it, it represents well the old Teach for Uganda and it fits in well with the new Teach for Uganda. And the idea is, as I mentioned, like it's known to scrap everything we've built before. It's like getting into the future. And as I mentioned, like every icon has to be simple, right? It has to relate to everyone in terms of the market segments we put together. It has to be memorable and it has to be identifiable. Like when you look at it, you shouldn't confuse it with a road sign. And moving on, there are so many ways of using this icon. And I want to show you that a great logo works well on black and white because we live in a vivid world and at the same time we live in a black and white world. So you would think that a logo has to have like different fundamentals, which is black and white. So moving on, I wanted to really own in on the old language. So I introduced this shape that encapsulates the icon, the brand marker, in a nice way that represents the old look, but in a fresh, new approach. So now when you bring in the typography, I figured out the balance between the icon and the typography so that when someone doesn't know what this icon stands for, they can read Teach for Uganda. And that is really, really important. One of these things shouldn't take attention from the other. They should work as it says, it's synergy. That is more of the core value here. So now, introducing color, I made a decision not to kill the old orange. So we carry on the same narrative of like this new morning that looks warm and super, exciting. So now to introduce like a bit of contrast, I remember this question came up in the presentation, and one of you guys wanted to know how do we come up with these colors. And I feel like the best way to put, rationale on this, we didn't base this on, I would say, intuition that me as a designer, I feel like this works perfect. But then when you look at the morning, every time you wake up, there's always like these contrast colors that, are apparent in the warm, sun rising. And that's how we come up with these palettes. And I want you to take a moment and wake up early in the moment, early in the morning around maybe 6, 5, and, just try to observe and consuming like that morning vibe. We will see that there are some unique colors that play a great role, and that's how we introduce this palette. So moving on, the beauty about building a brand, as I mentioned, like it's an ongoing process. So we look at all these touch points and how we can activate the brand. And here I show you like how color can be a major key player in activating the brand. These are the business cards. Almost this is what people use on a daily. It's the first brand touch point people might come across. And I go ahead to show you some stickers. How best can we activate the brand? How can we use these stickers? Say there are people who want like to brand their laptops. We could use that as a channel to carry on the narrative, because all this is to figure out ways of activating the brand. Say you're in that meeting and people are looking at your laptop, like how best can they stay intact with the brand in every scenario where maybe a stakeholder is into maybe a board member meeting or stuff like that, to remind them that this is us, this is how we represent ourselves. So looking at all these different products we're pushing, like the fellows, the children, and the alumni, figuring out ways of activating this, I came up with these posters to represent different domains of these people. And these posters could be used as a funny way to activate the brand in different universities, different schools, maybe different ways of communication. And I elaborated more on the poster. Just to introduce the brand, it's important to have like these key elements, say the building blocks, and how like these icons represent the growth blocks, say the people, right? The children, the next generation. So later on, the question is how best can we communicate on all these, digital channels and traditional channels as I listed them. So now I show you an example of how best we can leverage these digital channels and how we can communicate vibrantly, like different colors, and make it pop. But still, when you take a close glance, you can still see the warmth of the orange really coming out in different aspects of accents of colors. So now that marks like the first direction, and I'll take a break and let you guys really dissect that in, and then we move on to direction 2. Right. Fantastic.